Welcome to Making the Grade, the podcast that explores what's driving the decline in graduation rates between funding rounds and what it really takes to scale a venture-backed software startup successfully with realistic options to exit. I'm Tom Glasson, CEO at Scalewise, and each week I'm going to be joined by founders, investors, and some of the best go-to-market leaders in the world to unpack the strategies, the missteps, and the mindset shifts that separate those who graduate from those who don't. Expect real talk, actionable go-to-market insights, and honest stories that will help you scale more wisely and thrive in an increasingly competitive market. Because there is a smarter way to scale, and we're here to uncover it. Today's guest is Guillaume Moubeche, founder and CEO of Lemlist, a business that's scaled from zero to tens of millions in ARR without raising any venture capital. And in today's episode, we unpack how Guillaume entered one of the most crowded markets in SaaS, got rejected by over 30 VCs, but used those constraints to build a highly differentiated, capital-efficient go-to-market engine. We talk about first principles execution, building trust through personalization, why bootstrapping forces focus, and the real trade-offs founders don't fully understand when they take VC money too early. No matter if you're weighing up the VC route versus bootstrapping, or you're a fellow bootstrapped founder, this conversation will bring so many fresh perspectives and insights to the way successful businesses are actually built and scaled. So Guillaume, welcome to Making the Grade. How are you today?
I'm very well. What about yourself?
Yeah, I'm good, although not as good as you, because I'm in cold, wet, miserable England, and I know you're in sunny South Africa, so I'm feeling quite jealous right now. But I'm also really excited for today's conversation. I'd love to start, maybe take us back to the origin story and why you entered this market, and
Yeah,
how you
I
approached bootstrap scaling in those early years.
so I failed like a few businesses, and eventually, I knew that the biggest struggle for businesses was to find customers. I wasn't like that great at sales, but I thought like that I could start selling leads to potential like customers. So I basically started an agency where I was doing like a lot of cold emails. And eventually I just got like really good at it because I was doing it for many different industries. Because the reality is like in many cases, the downside for businesses to pay for meetings is actually extremely low. So we kind of like created with the agency like an irresistible offer where we were approaching, I don't know, like SMBs, and we were telling them, okay, like who was your ICP? We're trying to find like people who were selling basically either goods or services or products with an average value that is quite high. That way you can make a great markup on the service you're selling. And after using pretty much like all the tools on the market, I was like, okay, like there is no personalization, there is no like, like human touch. And I felt like sales for me is, all about trust. And the best way to build trust is to be able to personalize and show people that you care. So for me, trust essentially is based on three, it's kind of like a triangle. And if a side is missing, the triangle collapse and doesn't work. So you have like the emotional connection, which is how well have you done your research in the way you speak, how you communicate, etc. And then you have both credibility and also reliability. So credibility is have you helped similar people in the past, for example? So you're a bit credible. And reliable, if you make a promise, are you going to deliver on it? And the goal with all the tools we saw out there were they weren't really helping people build more trust. And that's how I came up with Lemlist, essentially.
I love that. And obviously at the time, you had Outreach, you had SalesLoft, you had Apollo, it was a congested space. How did you really differentiate in that space? And then given that you didn't raise any capital and these guys were raising lots of capital, how did you compete and really bootstrap your way through those early years?
So two things. I think like the first one is people believe that because we've been talking for so long about red ocean and blue ocean that you should always focus on a blue ocean. The truth in business is if no one has launched a business prior to you in that industry, it's probably a bad thing. And I feel like red oceans are often an execution play, meaning that if you can become better than competition, and better doesn't have to be like better at everything. You just have to be different and better at certain things. And to your point, of how do you differentiate? I basically like started from the first principles, and I was like, okay, like what are my customers trying to achieve with Lemlist? They want to book meetings. So sales teams want to book meetings with their prospects. And then the question I ask myself is, how can I help them do that better than competition? And for me, and from all the things that I had, worked on in the past with the agency, having more replies to your sales prospecting email or messages across various channels comes down to one, using the right channels. So we had to be like multi-channel, and that was like the vision from the start. Second was personalization and intent. So we needed to be able to give people the right data so they know the right person to reach out to at the right time. And third was personalization. So how can you be like different in a way that whenever you're going to write your emails, you know that they're going to not land in the spam folder, but land actually in the inbox, because your email is like a lot more personalized and essentially like doesn't triggers too many spam filters.
And it sounds like you had an irresistible offer, which often makes a big difference as well if you can really nail that brand promise, that offer, which is great. Now, tell me a little bit about the bootstrap journey that you went on, because it sounded like that wasn't necessarily intentional. You just couldn't raise finance. But I speak to a lot of founders who intellectually understand the trade-offs of VC, but only really feel them once expectations and boards and growth pressure really kicks in. For founders maybe that are weighing up the bootstrap versus VC route, what are the hidden trade-offs that come with taking external funding early on, in your view?
It's a good question. I think like it really depends on what you want to do and how you want to do it. In full transparency, of course, when I talk about the fact that I got rejected by maybe like 30 VCs, etc., like at the time it wasn't pleasant. But to be entirely honest, at the same time, I understand them. Like now I'm in the shoe of like an investor. So I'm like, yeah, of course, like that guy had failed businesses only. He's like a chemical engineer turned like a marketeer or whatever. So it's like, what, why would they, you're like, it doesn't make any sense. And as you said, like super competitive market, et cetera, et cetera. So, but I think like whenever you raise funds, and what I usually see is like you have to spend the money and spend it wisely. So you actually get like a nice return on what you're spending. So I think there are several things people should understand when they raise. If you raise with a traditional VC, the expectation is that your company becomes $1 billion company. So for a traditional VC, like having an exit at let's say 100 million, it doesn't really like work out for them, and it's very risky because the reality is like when a VC enters super early, let's say that they have like what we would call like a liquid pref. So essentially, if you raise 2 million and your company later gets sold for 2 million, you as a founder will get zero and the 2 million will get back to the VC. That's what the liquid pref does. But when you raise money, the funds who invested money in your company, they want to see you grow and they want to see you raise more money for a simple reason, because you need to put yourself in the shoes of a VC. And a VC, in the way they run their fund, it's I invest in a company that has a certain valuation. And for me to be able to tell my LPs, limited partners, so my investors, that the investment I'm making are actually like growing, I need to raise at a higher valuation. So basically, they need you to be able to raise at a higher valuation so they can communicate to their LPs that their investment is growing. And why do they need to do that? Is because a fund works actually as multiple funds. It's not just like one fund and it's one fund that will last for like 20, 30 years. No, like a fund is raised by the VCs, and that fund is usually like invested within like 2 to 3 years. So they raise another fund and another fund and another fund, and each fund will return like the entire like capital within like maybe 10 or 12 years to their LPs. They say 7, but it's never 7 because I've invested in many funds also. But that's kind of how it works. So as a founder, like you enter a game where you need to be able to invest money in a way that you know that you're going to get revenue from it, so you can raise more funds. And the reality as a bootstrap founder, and as you know, it was the first time I was building like a SaaS company. The reality is like I didn't know how to spend money. I didn't know what to do with the money. And the reality is that as soon as we became like really profitable and we are growing like 2-digit months over months, up to like the 10 million in annual recurring revenue that we reached in about 3.5 years, like the truth is like when we were at 10 million, I could have spent a lot more. I could have spent a lot more on hiring, but I didn't know how to do it. I wasn't a good manager. I wasn't a good CEO. I wasn't like, because these things, to be honest, it just takes time. Like, yeah, I was like good at marketing the company, good at sales, good at product, good at like doing the basic things, but I wasn't good at hyperscaling at the time. I mean, the company was growing really fast, but with the money we had, we could have done a lot more. And I realized that a lot later. I think it took me like maybe 2 more years to actually get all that knowledge, understand it, and understand how to do things different. So I wasn't that great at hiring back then because I had that bootstrap mentality. I didn't want to spend too much on things. I was like a cheap French bastard, as one might say, uh, and you know, like eventually it took me a bit of time to really like understand things and be able to maybe do it in a different manner.
Yeah, you're so right there, Graham. It's, you need to understand the VC power law and the game that they're playing. And it is a game. You once you're on that hamster wheel and you've raised that Series A, you've got to go and raise the Series B at a higher valuation. And before you know it, your cap table is very, very different to what you hoped maybe at the start. And yeah, your dilution is down. And I feel a lot of the founders don't go into that journey really with their eyes open and understanding the game that they're playing. And 2 out of 10 of the investments that the VC makes might make it, but it's a good chance you're going to be in one of the 8 that don't. So it's a risky game to play. But I'd love to dig into that 1 to 10 journey you just touched on there. You talked about getting to 10 million over 3 years. I think that's a journey where a lot of companies, either build real leverage or they accumulate a lot of accidental complexity on that journey and cost, quite frankly. Looking specifically at that stage for you, what advantages did being bootstrapped give you that VC backed companies maybe don't have?
I think like constraints forces creativity
Mm.
and money gives you optionality. So I just feel like if you really want to scale, you need to be the best at one thing. And when you have optionality and something doesn't work, you're a bit like a spoiled kid and you're going to spend it on something else. When you don't have money, you have no choice. You know what I mean? So to illustrate this for people listening, it's like I started the company with 1,000 euros. So when you don't have money to do like customer acquisition and you have a tool that helps you like do sales, you just use your own tool. And for me, it was also the thing I knew that I was good at. So I started using like I closed essentially like the first 100 customers using Lemlist, and the selling point was pretty easy because my strategy was actually like a bit different than what you would read in the books. So what you read in the books is if you want to do outbound that works, you need to focus on customers who pay a large amount of money. So essentially, your time invested has a positive return on investment. So to give you a simple example, if you're selling like a $5 product and you reach out to people because it takes a lot of time to actually get meetings when you do outbound. Let's say you can have like 15 meetings per week whenever you do outbound and you're selling like a $5 product. Let's say even a best case scenario, you're an amazing salesman and you close half of your deals. It means that every week you're making like 5 times 7 or 7.5. So it's like 35 bucks per week. So how are you going to be profitable? So no one would actually like do outbound if they sell like a very cheap product. On our end, we were selling a product that was costing at the time, I think it was around like the 30 bucks mark. So it didn't really make sense, like it was 30 bucks per user. So focusing on founders of tech company, early stage, etc., didn't really make sense. But because it didn't really make sense, for me, it actually did because no one would target these customers. So it was easier to book meetings. And also, it was easier to kind of build that referral network, I would say, and that would later on help us build a very strong brand and community and generate a lot of word of mouth. I would try to sell in France because we were based in France, but French are like really cheap bastard, and I'm one of them. So I was like, it's not gonna work. And I would start selling in the US and in APAC, so Asia, like Pacific, but mainly like Australia, Singapore. So I would do like demos early morning for like Australia, Asia. Then I would like work on sales prospecting. And from mid afternoon to late at night, I would be in the US. And what I realized is that people in the US would close like a lot faster. And whenever we were on meetings, the good thing with Lemlist, and I think this is kind of like an unfair advantage that's not always repeatable for many tools, but I would be on calls with people and eventually they would be like, hey, I don't know if outbound is for me. So I was like, okay, like, can you close a deal? Yeah, of course I can close a deal. Okay, so you just need basically like a meeting, right? Yes. So how exactly did I got this meeting with you? And then they would be like, oh shit, you sent me an email, and then they would realize. So eventually, like my closing rate and my booking rate was actually like really high compared to the industry average. And eventually I started to close like more and more deals. And once the customers were happy, I would reach out and say, hey, we're really like pushing hard to build the best product ever created. So thanks a lot for your feedback and being like a valuable customers. As you know, I'm trying to like make it a real business and I need to meet with other people and that I could help in their sales prospecting, anyone in your network that you have in mind. And then eventually people will like give me referrals. So referrals are much easier to close because they come from someone they knew and trust. So very quickly I started to build kind of this, let's say, community of people like helping the product to get better and also like referring to other customers. And in parallel to that, I was sharing a lot of content of what I was doing. I don't know if you remember, but in 2018, when we got started, if you wanted to learn cold emailing, you would type like cold email on Google, and you would end up like on HubSpot on an article written by a marketer. So someone was never done sales in their entire life, teaching you about sales and that's it. So everyone would copy paste the same like shitty templates and everyone would say cold email doesn't work. I started just sharing every single week a template of what I was doing and I would share the results. I started to do this for a full year, explaining to people what was working. And eventually, when the community started to build and grow, I managed to switch the momentum and say, as of next week, I'm going to launch something called Lemlister of the Week, meaning like we will take one of our users and we will share with the whole community their templates. And for people whom I share like the templates, you're going to be exposed to a community of potential buyers for your product or service of X thousand people. So I kind of like started to shift, the power play, I would say, and eventually, like more people started to share what was working. From what they were sharing, sometimes they had limitations in what they could do, so that would give me ideas on new feature to develop. Then from the new features, I will essentially have like new use cases and success stories, and eventually, like once your customer can become the hero of like their own journey and show like the success to others, then selling becomes kind of like irrelevant because it happens by itself. Fast forward, like to today, where so I'm not operational anymore in the business, but we're at like $45 million in annual recurring revenue, 15 million in EBITDA. Still, I think it's like 80% of the business or 85% of the business comes from people typing Lemlist just because we've created that really like strong momentum of people, who know that they're going to be successful using Lemlist. If they are like extremely successful, they are like pushed in the front row to share whatever in the community, and eventually like it just builds up and build up over again.
I love that. And yeah, I remember your content really well in those early days. And you were probably the first kind of pioneering that building in public approach, which seems to be quite common for kind of like AI native new startups now where the founders are on LinkedIn and but I remember that you were building a real community and a real following, and your content was rich in insight and tactical advice. And so it doesn't surprise me that you got the following and then the growth that you did. But I love what you're saying there in terms of the constraint of bootstrapping created the creativity. But it also sounds like you worked really damn hard as well in those early years, like super, super long days. I suppose I'd love to know what signals told you that your go-to-market engine was becoming genuinely repeatable and not just working through your own brute force. Because it sounds like in those early days, you were working very long hours, you were doing the content. Like at what point did you were like, okay, something's clicked, we've got repeatability. Like, what were those signals?
I think, to be honest, it's like looking at profit well and the numbers every every single month when you see like that you're growing 2 digit month over month, and even when you're not there, it's working. So typically, I would take on, I don't know, like 2 weeks holiday and work a bit less, and eventually I would see like that the business still like grew by a ton. But I just feel like, to be honest, until we reached maybe like 1 million in annual recurring revenue, it really felt like you have to push kind of like a super heavy rock to the top of the mountain, and then after that, like the going down is a lot easier. But it's um it's hard in a sense where you work hard, like, and you put in the hours, etc., and you have to make sacrifices, like not spending as much time as you would like with your family or your friends, etc. I'm launching like a new business at the moment, so I'm going back to working kind of like crazy hours from time to time. And again, like the because at some point you were asking me, like how do you know that what you're doing is working, etc. And for me, I think the question is, how do you know that you're doing the right thing? And you know that you're doing the right thing if, when most people around you are complaining because their business is not working and your business is actually not making that much money, but you don't feel like complaining. I think this is when you know that you're in the right spot, because it means that you're just working on something you're passionate about. And as long as you're seeing small daily improvements, it's fine. Because the reality is, like, when we say Lemlist grew from 0 to 10 million in ARR in like 3.5 years, it looks like super fast, and it is like super fast. Like statistically, or probabilistically, it's unlikely that a business happen to have this kind of numbers. But the truth is, like, in the first year, because you want things to go really fast and you spend a lot of time working, like it's your baby. So it's like 24/7 on, etc. The reality is, for us, growing at 2 digit months over months, when your first month you start at like 600 euros MRR, and then the months after, you grew by 30%, but 30%, it means you're making like 780. So it's still not quite there yet, you know what I mean? And after a year, you're maybe making, like, in monthly recurring revenue, like a few Ks, so maybe like 3 to 5K or something like this. And then everything compounds. So once you are 10 and you're growing 20% or 30%, it's like 12 to 13. That becomes like a lot more, but it took you a lot of time to get there.
Right, it's the power of compounding recurring revenue right there, and it's a nice place to be. But I'm sure it wasn't all up and to the right, and even the most disciplined founders end up placing bets on things that just don't work. But sometimes, bootstrap mistakes can hurt even more. What's a go to market bet you were confident in the early days that didn't work on that journey of 1 to 10, and what did it teach you about scaling efficiently?
I think I was really convinced that ads work, because everyone was doing ads. And once we started making a bit of money, we invested in ads, and it really like never worked. I don't say that it can't work for a business. I just think that some businesses, I mean, it's a very different skill set. And I just feel like, especially in the early days, it's difficult as a founder to find people that are extremely good at something if you don't know what good looks like. So if I didn't come from the ads background, like I had never run ads or anything. So how do I know that, what they're doing is the right thing? And, we've invested like a lot of money in things. And I think, again, business is all about trust, even in the people like you hire. But typically, like for us, ads, we've spent enormous amount of money on it, and it didn't give 10% of the results from whatever we were doing back then. But I know we're talking from the 1 to 10, but if I have to look at the business now, ads are working. You know what I mean? Like it works. But back then we really tried different people, different agencies, the best of the best, the recommendation, etc., etc. So for me, the lesson is like sometimes it's about the acquisition channel, sometimes it's about the people running this acquisition channel, and sometimes it's just not the right timing, meaning that your product at a certain time is not ad ready. And the reality is like you don't know what you don't know. So you always have to test and eventually place bets because it's almost impossible to have all the answers. So what I'd say and what I could give as an advice is like do the things where you feel like you can strive and you enjoy doing them. Because in my opinion, this is where you can put unlimited energy and effort and in a way that is sustainable. Because if you don't like doing ads and you just do ads because you're bored, your investor, your whatever mentor, whatever told you that it was the way to do it and it doesn't work, then you're just going to be like miserable and banging your head against the wall and it's just not worth it.
Yeah. And you clearly enjoyed creating that content and all of those best practices, which enabled you to put the effort in that you did, I suppose, and keep the consistency that you did over such a long period of time. So that enjoyment is such an important aspect. So thanks for calling it out. But you talked about hiring there and hiring the right people. And you were open earlier that you weren't the great hirer, you weren't the great manager. But you've said before that hiring is emotional, not scientific. Can you just unpack what you mean by that and maybe your biggest hiring lessons as Lemlist scaled as well?
So I think like the way I hired people evolved over time. And I think I did the best that I could with the resources that I had. So when you bootstrap and you don't have money, whether you're good at hiring or bad at hiring, you don't have many options to get the best of the best. What you can get though is people who have the willingness to learn, the drive, the motivation, and who you get along well with. And for me, I think in the early days, that's what I managed to do like pretty well. So I wouldn't say that I wasn't great at hiring. So because I felt like the team I assembled to go from 0 to 10 million was a really great team and full of really great people. But what I'd say is the reason I don't consider myself at the time great at building a team is because I didn't predict the limitations certain people could have in the scale of the company. Because the reality is like when you grow extremely fast to 10 million, you need to have people who are thinking 2 steps ahead. And you need to be thinking 2 steps ahead. And the truth is, as you scale, you're gonna need people who have done it in the past. You're gonna need people with more structure. You're gonna need people with who are fine, like running processes, etc., etc. Even if you want to keep things like as lean as possible, you still need these people. And the issue I think or like the mistake I made was thinking that building a company is about like loyalty. Like it was part of my values. I'm very loyal to my friends, my family, etc., etc. But the reality in business is like, if you're not the right person anymore, then you can stay in the company at a different role, of course, but you're just not the right person. And I don't think back then, because the company kind of felt like a life project with people I liked working with, etc. I don't think that I was brave enough. And I think like courage is something that is extremely important when you build a company. You need to be courageous in many ways, but in hiring and in managing people, it's extremely important. Because in reality, like there is nothing you can say that can't be understood by the people you've hired, as long as it's very like specific, fact based, and like down the line, people are also afraid. So when someone's courageous, they appreciate it, and they appreciate the fact that you took the time to, like have a conversation that sometimes is hard to have. I think as like the CEO or like the founder or the manager for whomever is listening, you need to be courageous enough to have the tough conversation. If you made a mistake in hiring someone, let them know as soon as possible. If it's not the right place for a person, let them know. If you gave someone like a role, like a manager role, and they can't manage, change that person. Like it's very important.
Mm, mm. So there's obviously courageous in decisions once you've hired someone that isn't working out or they need some very specific feedback. How would that courage show up in, I suppose, the type of profile you hired and when you hired? If you were to look back now and be more courageous, what would you have done differently in terms of the profile and the timing of those hires?
So the first thing is I would have started to hire like a lot earlier. And when I say started to hire, it means like meeting with people, like doing a lot of networking events or like just reaching out to people and have like informal chat, like 20, 30 minutes. So reach out to like marketers, sales, ops, whomever, like you see someone on LinkedIn, you've heard someone on a podcast, I don't know, you like a company and they're doing great. Like reach out to their head of sales, reach out to like their head of marketing, like just have chats, like, hey, like, what are you working on? Like, what's working for you? Okay, like we haven't tried that. It seems that, okay, it's good. Like, just see how they think. See, like what their struggles, like, can you help them? Like, can you just have a sense of, okay, like I'm gonna help you. So we start brainstorming on a topic, like 5, 10 minutes. How does that feel? Like, does that feel natural? Do I like this conversation? But do it at scale. Like you should spend, I don't know, like 20, 30% of your time like meeting with people that you find like exceptional, and eventually, it will pay off because if you have a list of people you dream working with, once you have the cash to do it and you reach out to them, I can guarantee that it's the easiest hire you will ever make and everything is smooth. So on my end, what I would say is like start earlier to like meet with a lot of different people in different industries just to like network, see what's working and see how you feel when you vibe with people. Then second step is or hire, like for the next stage a little bit earlier. So if you're scaling, like just make sure that you can hire the right person for what's coming next. And that person might be the person who has done it in the past, or it might be a person that is extremely smart and learning like extremely quickly. But you usually send that when you work with people.
Such good advice to be constantly networking and meeting candidates that just help shape your view of what good looks like before you even go in and hire for that role. So I love that. One of the big things we see at Scalewise, and I've noticed through my career, is the mistakes that get made around hiring sales leaders in particular, but also marketing leaders. The average tenure is incredibly low. It's like 18 months in B2B tech for a sales leader or a marketing leader. Tell me about your experiences hiring sales leaders or go-to-market leaders, and what was the biggest mistake that you made?
I think the first person we hired to lead like the sales team was actually a really good sales rep. But I don't think that at the time she was the best manager because but it wasn't really her fault, to be honest. I mean, it was partially her fault, I guess, but I had these things which was lead by example. So I wanted everyone to really like show that they could do the thing, etc., etc. And over time, I feel like it's super important to be operational. It's super important to lead by example. I still stand by that principle. But in sales, to a certain extent, if you have like someone who's extremely competitive, they might misinterpret it into I need to be the one bringing the most revenue. And I think for our sales team, that was very like counterproductive for many years because in the end, once you have like someone you trust and who's outperforming everyone, you tend to give them like I'd say like more trust and more responsibility. So if they tell you that their team is not performing well and that they should get fired, you you back them up, like you're not going to do like micromanagement and go. And so we've wasted like quite a lot of time with this. And what I would advise is to just like stay close to your managers or like the head of when they get started, so you can actually see. And actually, like, over time, I know that it's important to talk to the team directly to see how they feel, and not just put walls behind like middle managers. I really don't like that. I think everyone should be held accountable for what they do. Yeah, that's kind of like the lessons, I'd say.
Yeah, really good point about, I mean, it happens all the time, right? Good reps promoted into management, and actually, they're not necessarily good managers, but they just get put in that position because they hit their quota every quarter. And actually, what makes them a very good rep doesn't always make them a great manager, and that can create real tension within that team and the business. I'd love to shift gears a little bit now, Guillaume, and talk about the current state of outbound, and maybe even kind of the future of outbound. If I think back to the days of Aaron Ross and predictable revenue, back in the early 2000s, and I think about how outbound has evolved over the last 20 years. What do you feel has really changed about how outbound works over the last, year or two? And then maybe let's look forward to, like, how do we feel like the next couple of years are going to play out from an outbound standpoint?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's very difficult to predict the future, to be honest. But I think you can have like a conviction and you can bend the future to your willpower if you have a strong vision about something. But my vision is like every single year since I had my agency, people were saying that outbound is dead. And the reality is like it's not, to be honest. Like we've seen more and more people sending like mass emails and being able to go against, like go around like spam filters, etc., etc. So what I believe is like over time with AI, it will be harder to actually like reach out people, because I think like a lot of emails will be like put in the spam filter. So I think like all the tools, and there are many who are promoting mass campaigns and these kind of things, they will run out. Like I mean, they will go out of business. I think like what we did was from the beginning, focusing on personalization, on the quality of the relationship, etc. And the truth is like it still works. It still works when you use like multiple channel. And I'm actually pretty excited, to be honest, about what's coming for with AI. I just feel like there are too much repetitive work that's being done, and that shouldn't be the case. So my view is like from a connection to your CRM, I should be able to already know who are like your top customers because of what they pay. I should already be able to know from all the calls you've recorded that, like when you say certain sentences and talk about certain key points in a certain way, this is how you close your deals. I should already be aware that the new feature you've launched actually like converts better with a certain type of people. And from that, I should be able to put you in touch with other people who look exactly like your existing customers and that you don't know, and that you should talk to because you can help them. And for me, I just believe like Lemlist within the years, and I mean how I see outbound, that our competitor, I don't know if this is what they're doing, or but my and our vision, it's a lot more of, we're basically the connector between someone who has like a solution to a specific problem and the person who has that problem. And our goal is, before, if we take like a picture, it's like you have a solution to a specific problem, but you don't really know who has that problem. So you just like you're on the streets and you're yelling. It's like who wants candy? Like who's having like a sugar crave, and it's like so you're on the street, and for all the people who don't want candy, you're just bothering them. They're chilling at home. They are watching like a TV series on Netflix. They don't want to hear your fucking bell, and that's how it was. So now it's like, hey, what if I knew exactly where the person who wants candies and you're selling candies? So now I'm just like putting you in touch at the right time, and like you make your business and you're happy. And I feel like AI is basically like is gonna allow this to happen. And we're seeing it already like step by step. We're aggregating like a lot of data from a lot of providers to get signals, to get like a lot of like little things. And as we grow, because we acquired also like another company recently. So step by step, I feel like AI is gonna allow actually inboxes to have like less clutter and people to just have things that they really care about in the same way. Because if you think of it, like your inbox, whether it's LinkedIn inbox, which is probably the worst kind of inbox ever created by mankind, in the way the UX wants people to kill themselves, I assume. Uh, but whether it's LinkedIn inbox, email, or WhatsApp, nothing has been. It's not up to the level of what we can do technically. In a sense that if you look at Instagram, TikTok, Google, like Google search or whatever, YouTube, the recommendation of this algorithm is extremely strong, and they can push you the right content at the right time, and you love to watch it and you can watch it for hours. I don't understand why it's different within our mailbox, within and to be honest, like the amount of time I click on ads on Instagram or whatever because it's something that's relevant to me and I can buy like from it, it's high. And I think it should be the same with outbounds. But I just feel like right now too many people are shooting in the dark, and I wouldn't blame them either because it's just like they don't have the right tools. But I think that the future will allow you to just do things in a much smarter way.
And it sounds like there's a big role for agents to play in that future as well. But I suppose that leads me to my final question on this topic, which is, do you see the role of the SDR being replaced by AI and agents or not?
I don't want to be like other companies who are saying like, hey, like someone using AI will replace someone who's not using AI now. Jobs are disappearing. I was with Des Trainer, like the founder of Intercom yesterday, and we were talking about how, like Finn, what they created for customer support is actually like solving 80%, 70% of the ticket, which means that some people don't need their job anymore, or at least like their job is gonna evolve. But it's been the same with everything, like agriculture. Back then, you had to dig in with your hands, like to plant seed or whatever. Then, we had the shovel, and it was like very annoying. Then, we saw like, hey, look at that animal over there. It looks strong. Like, let's put something in their back and have them walk. And then like, and eventually we created machine, and everything got different and better. But I think for sales, the role of a SDR is sometimes very, very repetitive in a sense where you have a list. For each list, you need to go on a profile on LinkedIn. For each person, you need to find a sentence to personalize and send them a message in order. All these things like can be done, like with AI, and they can actually be done a lot better because it's not just doing them and replacing them. Because with automation, you can already do a lot. It's just doing them better than a human. And what's quite funny is like when you have like a human doing very repetitive tasks, is that they sound more robotic than robots. So an AI can have unlimited creativity and do like things in a much better way, in my opinion.
I suppose the only bit is using the phone. Is your prediction that AI will be making those phone calls as well instead of SDRs at some point soon?
I think it's quite scary to see how like voices like are cloned, etc. I don't think we're quite there yet. So the question I think is more, do we believe that we can really clone a human voice in an extremely accurate way in a near future? And I think the answer is yes. And once you can do it, why would you care about making the phone calls yourself? Because the thing is like, the real question is like, until when, or like how long does it take for it to happen? Because I just feel like right now what's happening is like we see a lot of great demos from companies who have raised shit tons of money and have hired like the best whatever marketing agency to create like a cool film or video. But once you try the product, it's highly deceptive. It doesn't do what it say it does. So right now we're creating basically like a generation of people who are just frustrated by clunky products that don't work. But the truth is like in the future it will work. We're just like early. It's the same thing. Like for me, it's bigger than the internet. What's happening? Like it's gonna be transforming like every industry, every like a lot of jobs. Everything's gonna change eventually. So the only thing we don't know is the rate at which it will change. So is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Is it 15 or 20 years? I don't know. But is it gonna happen? Yes, it will.
Well, Graham, on that note, I think we're going to close today's podcast. Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been such a generous conversation. I love just how intentionally you've built Lemlist from the early days, kind of starting with almost nothing, scaling to tens of millions in ARR and in a capital efficient way. Really when probably capital efficiency wasn't the in thing at the time, all while resisting a lot of the default paths that founders feel, I think, pressured into when they're a B2B SaaS company. So I have to take my hat off to everything that you've done. I'm excited to hear and see what you're doing next. It sounds like you've got another business in the works, so I'll be keeping a close eye on that. But really appreciate you taking the time to share the thinking behind the journey and not just the outcome. So thank you so much for joining us on Making the Grade.
Thanks for the invite, Tom. Have a great day.
Thank you so much for listening to Making the Grade. We really hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you have any questions following this episode, or you'd like to recommend a guest perhaps for our next season, please let us know at podcast@scalewise.com. And if you did enjoy today's episode, please do consider leaving us a review on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We'd really appreciate that. As this is a brand new show, reviews really help us spread the word and reach new listeners. Plus, we'd also love to hear what you're enjoying about our show. Thank you so much for your support, and see you soon for another episode of Making the Grade.